They said I wasn't worth investing in, that I'd figure it out, because I always did. But today, I stand on this stage, in front of thousands, as they sit just rows away, clapping because they have no choice. My name is Talia Monroe, and at 24, I've become everything they couldn't see in me. While my sister was showered with support, praise, and funding for her dreams, I was left to build mine from the ground up, in silence, in doubt, in hunger. This is not just a story about favoritism. It's about choosing to rise when the people you trusted most leave you behind. It's about creating your own legacy and watching those who once looked past you finally look up. But before I show you the moment their faces turned pale at graduation, you need to understand what came before the applause, because no spotlight shines without the darkness that precedes it. I grew up in the kind of neighborhood where people trimmed their lawns on Sundays and waved politely to neighbors they barely knew. On the outside, our life looked spotless. Brick house, 2 cars, holiday cards with everyone smiling and matching sweaters. But inside that picture-perfect frame, the cracks ran deep. My parents, Everett and Claire Marin, were both practical, orderly people. Dad was a systems analyst, always solving other people's problems with logic and flowcharts. Mom taught math at the local high school, firm, precise, and never a fan of emotional displays. They didn't yell, they didn't hit, and they didn't hug. Instead, they measured love in GPAs, college acceptance letters, and scholarships, and in their eyes, my younger sister Ivy was the star pupil. Ivy was everything they admired. Quick-witted, bubbly, effortlessly good at everything that could be graded or awarded. She skipped a grade in middle school and had a knack for public speaking that made her a debate team darling. When she walked into a room, people noticed. When I did, I was usually already sitting in the back corner. Holidays were the most obvious display of imbalance. One Christmas, I opened a thin package to find a discount brand calculator for school. Ivy squealed over the newest tablet and a designer bag to start building her professional wardrobe. My mother offered a terse smile. "You're always so independent, Isla. We thought this would be more your style." I didn't argue. I never did. I learned early that speaking up didn't shift their perception. It only made things more uncomfortable. So I smiled, nodded, and folded their decisions into my silence. School wasn't much better. When Ivy had a science fair, both our parents took the day off to help her set up a model of the solar system, complete with rotating planets and LED lights. When my paintings were displayed at the district art showcase, Mom stopped by during her lunch break, snapped a blurry photo, and left before I could even spot her in the crowd. "Art's a lovely hobby," Dad would say, patting my shoulder like he was indulging a child who collected rocks. "But it won't pay the bills, not like policy or law." I began burying my feelings under plans, small, quiet ones. I joined the math club, started watching business TED Talks late at night, and kept a notebook of ideas for ventures I could someday build. Things my parents didn't understand, and so ignored. Only one person seemed to notice I was trying, my grandmother, Ruth. Every summer, she'd invite me to her small lakeside cabin 2 hours north. Ivy rarely came. No Wi-Fi, no crowds, no stage. But I loved it. Grandma Ruth would sit with me on the porch for hours while I scribbled out thoughts or sketched new app ideas on loose paper. "You've got a mind that solves from the side," she once told me, sipping coffee from her chipped green mug. "Not straight on like your parents expect. Don't ever lose that." I didn't, even when it would have been easier to just fall in line like Ivy, even when my silence was mistaken for weakness. I just kept building, quietly, secretly, waiting for the day when I wouldn't need to raise my voice to be heard. That day came sooner than I expected, and it started with a dinner that would break something in me permanently. It happened over takeout and sparkling water. We were seated around the dining table for one of those rare family dinners my mother insisted we still had, even if it was nothing more than 30 minutes of quiet chewing and awkward glances. Ivy had just come home from another debate win and was practically glowing with pride as she detailed the judge's praise. That's when my father cleared his throat and folded his hands. "We need to talk about college," he said. His eyes were fixed on Ivy. He spoke in measured tones, like always. "We've been saving for your education since you were little. Westbridge is expensive, but we can cover it. You won't have to worry about anything. Just focus on your studies. Ivy gasped. Are you serious? Of course, Mom chimed in, beaming. You've earned it, sweetheart. They all looked so pleased, so certain. I sat frozen, waiting for the second part. The part where they turned to me and said, "And for you, Isla." But it never came. I asked anyway, quietly. What about me? The silence that followed was louder than any scream I'd ever heard. My father looked down at his plate. My mother let out a soft breath, like she'd been hoping I wouldn't ask. Finally, Dad answered, We only have enough for one of you. And Ivy, she's always had more academic potential. She's the safer investment. Safer? Like I was some high-risk stock they didn't feel confident backing. You're resourceful, Isla, Mom added, like it was a compliment. You've always figured things out on your own. We thought you might do community college, maybe transfer later, or work for a bit. You're practical like that. Then came the sentence I'll never forget. She deserves it, but you don't. I didn't respond. I didn't scream. I just stood up, walked to my room, and locked the door. And for the first time in a long time, I let myself cry. Not from sadness, but from clarity. They had never seen me, and they never would. The next morning, I packed a bag and drove 2 hours north to Grandma Ruth's cabin. When she opened the door and saw my face, she didn't ask questions. She just held me like no one else ever had. That night, sitting on the porch, with a blanket over my legs and my eyes swollen, I told her everything. She listened, really listened. When I finished, she looked at me with a quiet fierceness. They're wrong, Isla. You don't need them to believe in you. You've got something they can't see, and that's not your fault. But it is your power. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at her kitchen table with a pen, a notebook, and an old laptop she let me borrow. I started researching scholarships, work-study programs, federal loans, private loans, grants, anything. By sunrise, I had a plan. I wouldn't wait for them to change. I wouldn't beg for scraps. I would go to Westbridge on my own terms. 2 weeks later, I submitted 21 scholarship applications, applied for housing in the cheapest off-campus unit I could find, and secured 2 part-time jobs near campus. One in a coffee shop, another shelving books at a used bookstore. The day Ivy went shopping with Mom for dorm essentials and a new laptop, I packed hand-me-down bedsheets into a box and borrowed my grandma's old suitcase. They barely acknowledged I was going, too. On move-in day, they drove Ivy in the family SUV. I followed behind in my aging Honda, with the engine light blinking and the AC barely functional. As they pulled into the university's main gate, I took the back entrance toward the student housing bulletin board. My apartment was a 30-minute walk from campus, shared with 3 strangers. Before she drove away, Mom turned to me through her window. Good luck, Isla. I hope it works out for you. I didn't say thank you. I just nodded. Because it wouldn't work out. I would make it work. Freshman year didn't welcome me. It swallowed me. My days started at 5 a.m. I studied for 2 hours before my shift at the coffee shop. I rushed to class, still smelling like espresso and steamed milk, then spent the afternoons shelving used textbooks, coughing through dust, my fingers stained with ink. I did homework between customers, recorded lectures to replay while I cleaned the coffee machine, and calculated whether I could afford both groceries and printing credits each week. Sleep came in 4-hour windows. Social life was a luxury I didn't dare afford. Meanwhile, Ivy posted photos of dorm life. Her study groups, themed parties, brunches with Mom on campus visits. She looked radiant in every photo. All I saw in the mirror was grit and dark circles. But something else was taking shape beneath the exhaustion. I was learning in layers most students never touched. My business classes weren't theory for me. They were survival. While my classmates struggled with accounting basics, I was already applying budgeting strategies in real time. Every cent I spent had a spreadsheet and a backup plan. Midway through the semester, my professor, Dr. Weathers, stopped me after class. Your analysis in the case study, real-world level, she said. You ever consider entrepreneurship? That word lit something in me. I remembered the late nights in Grandma Ruth's cabin, scribbling ideas no one took seriously. I still had that notebook, dog-eared and worn. That night, I opened it again. The idea started small, a virtual assistant service for local businesses, bookkeeping, customer emails, social media posts, things I had learned juggling my jobs. I built a simple website using free templates, created 3 packages with flat fees, and posted in local business forums and Facebook groups. Within a month, I landed 2 clients, a flower shop that needed help with online orders, and a small law office drowning in missed emails. I called it Marintask, after my last name. It wasn't fancy, but it worked. And I didn't tell a soul, not even Ivy. My second breakthrough came from someone I barely knew, June, my apartment roommate. She was the kind of person who paid attention without needing to say much. One night, she noticed me nearly pass out after skipping dinner to meet a deadline. "You can't keep doing this," she said, setting down a bowl of pasta in front of me. "Eat. I already made too much." That night, she became my anchor. She started batch cooking meals, keeping containers labeled with my name in the fridge. When I was too tired to edit a paper, she'd read it over. She reminded me to drink water, made flashcards for exams, and quietly defended my time when other roommates got loud during finals. "This is what family does," she told me, "and if your actual family can't see what you're doing, then they don't deserve front row seats to your success." By the end of the year, I had 4 consistent clients, enough income to drop one of my part-time jobs, and, most shockingly, Dean's List honors. Dr. Weathers invited me to apply for a faculty research assistant role over summer break. The stipend was more than both my jobs combined. That summer, I stayed on campus. I worked with Dr. Weathers on a study analyzing the impact of digital tools on rural small businesses. I learned how to gather data, interpret market trends, and apply strategy under constraint. I also kept building Marintask, adding services based on what I was learning. One evening, after I presented a sample pitch to the professor, she paused and said, "You don't just think like a business owner, Isla. You think like a strategist. You see gaps, and then you build bridges." For the first time, I allowed myself to believe I wasn't just surviving. I was building something real. Graduation day arrived with cruel clarity. The air was sharp, the sky too blue. It almost felt staged, like the universe knew this moment had been years in the making. I zipped up my gown in silence. No congratulatory text from Mom, no card, no flowers. Just a quick "see you there" from Ivy, followed by an emoji that tried too hard to be cheerful. Grandma Ruth arrived early, carrying a garment bag and an envelope. Inside was a stole, hand-embroidered in soft navy silk. It read, "Made under pressure." "It's yours," she said, fastening it around my shoulders. "Wear it like armor." Outside the auditorium, graduates gathered in a buzzing, chaotic line. I spotted Ivy, hair glossy, makeup perfect, her gown pressed to perfection. She ran up and hugged me, tighter than I expected. "Can you believe we made it?" she asked. "I can," I replied. "But not for the same reasons." She fell quiet, then nodded. "Fair." We filed in alphabetically, just close enough to see each other from our rows. As we walked toward the stage, I glanced into the crowd. There they were, my parents, dressed like royalty, front row, VIP seating, smiling as if they had played some great role in this day. The ceremony moved quickly. Degrees were conferred, names were called, cheers echoed. I crossed the stage, accepted my diploma, and spotted Grandma Ruth beaming. My name echoed louder than I expected, and for the first time, my mother clapped, hesitantly, like someone testing the temperature of water they once said was too cold. Then the president returned to the podium. "Before we conclude," he said, "we'd like to honor a student whose journey exemplifies everything this institution hopes to instill: resilience, innovation, and the refusal to be underestimated." My name was called. I walked to the stage. I stood at the podium, scanned the crowd, and caught their eyes, my parents, staring with confusion. "My name is Isla Maren," I began, voice steady, And 4 years ago, I stood alone, rejected by the people who should have supported me most. But I chose not to let their silence write my story. I spoke about late shifts, tight budgets, business plans drafted over instant noodles, about self-worth defined by grit, not permission. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The truth echoed anyway. When I stepped back, the applause hit like thunder. The president returned. "And there's more," he said, smiling. "Miss Marin is not only this year's valedictorian, graduating with a perfect 4.0. She also built a business now valued at 6 figures, won the National Collegiate Business Innovation Prize, and has accepted a position with one of the top strategy firms in the country." Gasps. Applause. A standing ovation. I turned my head slightly. My mother's face was pale. My father's mouth hung open. Then came the last blow. In honor of her journey, the University Board has established the Isla Marin Resilience Scholarship, awarded annually to a student overcoming financial or family hardship with extraordinary resolve. That word again. Resolve. I left the stage to a roar. As I walked back to my seat, Ivy grabbed my hand and whispered, "You just changed the story, and they'll never be able to rewrite it again." She was right. From that moment on, I would no longer be their afterthought. I would be the name they had to explain. After the ceremony, I didn't rush to find my parents. I let them find me. They stood awkwardly near the campus fountain, surrounded by chattering relatives who now knew exactly what they'd failed to see for years. My father's voice was overly cheerful. "Well, that was quite a surprise. You've really been keeping busy." I looked him in the eye. "I wasn't hiding. You just weren't looking." Before they could respond, Ivy slid next to me and wrapped her arm around my shoulder. "It's amazing what Isla's built, right?" she said loudly. "All by herself. No support, no funding, just pure determination. Imagine if she'd been given what I was." My mother winced. Others stared. Silence stretched. I broke it. "I won't pretend this day erases what came before, but it defines what comes next." That evening, while the extended family gathered for dinner at the rental house, I joined Grandma Ruth, Ivy, June, and my mentor at the business school's private reception. Real smiles, real pride. These were the people who had fed me, taught me, fought for me when it wasn't convenient. The family I chose. We toasted with cheap champagne and paper cups, but it felt more real than any fine crystal in my parents' hands ever could. Later that night, Grandma Ruth handed me an old velvet box. Inside was a slim silver bracelet with a single engraving. "Seen." "My mother gave it to me when I graduated," she said. "She told me every woman should be seen for who she really is, not what others decide she's worth." It shimmered under the porch light. So simple, so powerful. A week later, I declined my parents' offer to help with apartment costs near my new job. "Too little, too late," I said kindly. "I'm already covered. Salary, savings, scholarships. I'm not in need." They nodded, unsure what to say. But I knew. They hadn't raised a daughter they could be proud of. They had ignored one who became remarkable in spite of them. I no longer needed their apology, and I certainly didn't need their approval. Their absence had shaped me, but it hadn't defined me. What defined me was how I responded to it, and I didn't respond with bitterness. I responded by building, by outgrowing, by rising so high they couldn't look away, no matter how hard they tried. Now I define myself, and I belong to no one's expectations but my own. I've learned that real love, real family, is never conditional. It doesn't show up when it's convenient or when you've already succeeded. It shows up when you're tired, unproven, struggling, and still trying. Grandma Ruth showed up. June showed up. Even Ivy, late, but willing to face the truth, showed up. And I showed up for myself. That is the legacy I carry now, not the one my parents tried to assign me, but the one I carved with my own hands, under pressure they thought would break me. They were wrong. It didn't break me. It built me. And maybe that's the quietest kind of revenge. Not rage, not humiliation, but excellence. Not just proving them wrong, but proving myself right. and doing it so completely, so undeniably, that their opinion no longer holds weight. That's the power of choosing your own story. And I'm just getting started.